If you don't care about the Paper Mario lore and want to skip to the actual review of the Origami King, skip to this part of the video. I swear I will not be offended. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to the actual video. So when I was a wee little brainless child, I had Paper Mario to help fill in the holes of my brain, and because of that it holds a special place in my heart. The Thousand Year Door was one of the first games I played as a kid, and it still remains to this day as one of my favorite games of all time. The battle system was great, the story and characters are fantastic, the style was and still is really pleasing to look at, and while the exploration was a little bit less of the focal point of the game, I still thought they did a really good job with it and there was always something interesting to see. But it seems as if somewhere down the line, Nintendo decided that the Paper Mario games were too cool and decided to make them a lot less interesting and took a complete turn for the worst and got rid of everything that made the original 3 games great. Let's take a look at the series as a whole and see where they went wrong. In 2000, Nintendo released an RPG Mario game for the Nintendo 64 named Mario RPG. But in the end, they decided to change the name to Paper Mario based on the style and art of the game. But unlike the games now, the game was only titled Paper Mario for the art style. The paper gimmick wasn't really a huge element until recent games. He did have a couple abilities in the Thousand Year Door that revolved around paper though. Things like crushing his soul and bone structure into a paper airplane to entertain the children, and flattening him for future deviant art atrocities. But with the Nintendo 64's capabilities, they did an amazing job making a solid RPG Mario game with a different style, great characters and enemies, and even though basic, a decent Mario-style story with Peach falling into Bowser's castle like he does on a weekly schedule, and Bowser being a big ol' meanie. While the game wasn't as successful as some of the other Nintendo 64 titles, it still made enough of a profit for Nintendo to make a sequel 4 years later on the new console, the Nintendo GameCube, which is my favorite Nintendo console of all time. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door took everything the original had going well for it and improved it on every way imaginable. A better, darker story with more twists and turns, more original characters, enemies, and bosses, an improved battle system, awesome environments, and much, much more. This game saw much more success for Nintendo, being the 12th most sold GameCube game ever, which is arguably what started the actual Paper Mario franchise because Nintendo realized the cash money they could get from this. Continuing this series, we were given Super Paper Mario for the Nintendo Wii in 2007. This game is different. But this difference isn't actually a bad thing. Change can be good sometimes, and in this case it works pretty well. But while getting rid of the Thousand Year Door's partner system, they instead switched those up for drawings found on the Nintendo's fridge, which were called pixels. And these pixels grant you small powers like swinging a hammer, turning sideways, things like that. They actually got rid of the battle system and instead switched it for a more traditional Mario approach, stomping on enemies in 2D. Personally, I think the game is a really solid entry into the franchise, and a lot of people have even admitted that this is their favorite Paper Mario game in the entire franchise. It had a great story, really good environments, even more good characters. And even though not a lot of people agree with me on this take, I thought the gameplay was one of the best parts of this game. And I don't even really like side-scrollers that much. But alas, this would be the last good Paper Mario entry in the franchise for quite some time. In 2012, Nintendo released its first handheld Paper Mario game on the Nintendo 3DS. This was also the first Paper Mario game to completely suck. Paper Mario Sticker Star was the worst game in the Paper Mario series by far. It just took everything the original games had and crushed it into nothing of substance. Some of the issues this game had included a lack of partners, a heavily dubbed down battle system with no real point or reward to it, an incredible lack of new original characters, partners, and enemies, a non-existent story, extremely basic environments and music, very tedious gameplay and exploration, frustrating movement, a world map instead of a connecting overworld, the sticker system they implemented for battles instead of just having a regular RPG turn-based thing, and much, much more. In fact, off the top of my head, I can't even name one redeeming thing about this game. The only thing they did kind of well, even a little bit in this game, was the paper style. And even though at some points it goes a bit too far, it does make the game look nicer. But besides that, there isn't much to say about this entry into the franchise. And because of that, I don't want to spend any more time on this game. Next! Seeing all the hate this game got, in 2016 Nintendo did the smartest thing imaginable. They made Sticker Star again, but this time with colors. And it was on the Nintendo Wii S. While this game is a definite improvement on Sticker Star, with the gameplay and exploration being a lot more fun this time, as well as a graphical update and much better dialogue, as well as some much more questionable dialogue. But there was still plenty wrong with this game. Battles became more tedious and even more complicated than they were in Sticker Star. This was because of how many different things you had to do a single basic attack, as well as not being able to tell how much damage you were doing because instead of a health bar there were color meters. Which basically means in this game Mario can literally watch the color drain from his enemies' faces, just like the Mario we know and love. But with how tedious the battle system was, and the lack of rewards you get from battling, you might as well just avoid battling altogether, and most people do when they play it. So, ironically, for a game called Color Splash, this was pretty bland and colorless. This unfortunately marks the end of the Paper Mario franchise. Until like 3 months ago when Nintendo randomly dropped a trailer for a new Paper Mario game with no hype or any sort of marketing beforehand. So this game falls out of the heavens in mid-2020 with absolutely no warning or marketing, which is pretty weird for Nintendo, and Paper Mario is a pretty decent-sized franchise for them, and it almost seems like they were trying to hide it and sweep it under the rug as if they were ashamed of it. But despite the lack of marketing, this still generated one of the best-selling Nintendo games of the year, selling almost 110,000 copies in the first week, which was the third highest game to do that this year, right under Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us Part 2. Now for the actual game, it is a huge step up from Color Splash in every single way possible, but still hugely underwhelming if you're comparing it to the original 3 games. But I want to try and keep an open mind while reviewing this game particularly, so I'm going to comply with my OCD and divide this up into 3 sections: the things that I like about the game, the things that I thought they did well but could still improve on, and the things that I absolutely hate about the game and wish they would take out completely. The first improvement is pretty obvious, I think. The graphics and game feel. This game both looks and feels amazing. The way things just bend and crumple and crinkle and fold is so satisfying and never gets old. Even though they go too far with the paper gimmick sometimes, I do admit that it does make the game look super nice. It does really add to the charm of the game. Next is the dialogue, which is super well done as well. Everything everyone says in the game gives me a big Joker smile when I hear the humor in it. They clearly worked super hard and tried, and it shows. The music is also really well done. They usually are in Paper Mario games, with of course the exception of Sticker Star. The open world and connecting levels are a fantastic addition to this game as well. It was very smart of Nintendo to get rid of the world map like they did in the previous 2 games. Now for a rapid fire on the other things that I like about the game. The collectible aspect of this game with all the question blocks, treasures, and toads to find. How they replace stickers and cards with more permanent or semi-permanent attacks. The hidden areas and secrets. And even though I already mentioned this before, the humor is great. And with that out of the way, now it's time to get to the things that I liked a little bit less. For the things that are there but could be improved on, there's the battle system, which is vastly improved from the previous 2 games. But as the game goes on, it still does become a chore to battle, and besides for coins, for people who want to 100% the game, there's no real reason to fight. But the spinny gamer chair battle system is still a step up from what they were doing in the last 2 games. And there are some hints of partners that help you inside of battle and outside of battle. Barely. Which is why you don't really care about them that much, because they aren't even a big focus or even an element to the game really. They're just kind of there, just doing their own thing until they occasionally do something somewhat useful or say something funny. But ultimately, not being able to control them very much makes them feel a lot less substantial. Now for the story, huge improvement. It was much better and a lot darker than the last 2 games. And while it isn't a major focus, it's still there, and there are some really good moments in the game. But, similar to the last point I made, the characters don't feel very important, and you almost never care about them except for a few key moments. Whereas in the Thousand Year Door, you really do care about every single character and partner you encounter. And once again, I'm going to do a few rapid fire ones to end this off. The environments are really cool, but still could be done better. Except World 5, that one is amazing, it's super fun to look at. The items and badges, again, are there, but don't add that much. It's a bit too similar to the cards and stickers in the previous 2 installments. And now, let's finally move on to the things that I did not like about Paper Mario the Origami King. Now for the things that make my tummy hurt and blood boil. Let's start with the basic. The exclusion of new and original characters is infuriating, and this new origami prop is just an excuse for them to reuse all the basic Mario enemies, but oh, they're different because origami, haha. The only 2 original characters are the 2 origami siblings, Olivia and Ollie, which are good characters, which makes me wonder why Nintendo is so afraid to make more new characters, because when they do, they usually turn out pretty well. Next up is when the paper gimmick goes a bit too far. While it does make the game look pretty, I think everyone is sick of fighting scissors and tape and pencils and staplers. And again, it seems like they're doing this because they're so afraid to create new and original enemies. And the final thing, which is a bizarre one for how long Nintendo took to fix this, but there are some glitches in the game that are game-breaking, huge, level-failing bugs. There were literally glitches in this game that prevented you from getting 100% or even finishing the game itself. And there is a video going over this, which I will link in the description below. So go check it out if you want to see how to completely soft lock yourself in the game. Overall, I think this is a pretty decent entry into the Paper Mario franchise. While it doesn't seem that Nintendo cares about what we really want in the new Paper Mario games, and instead choosing to focus on people who have never played a Paper Mario game before, I understand why they're doing that from a money perspective. It makes sense that they're trying to pander towards people who have never played the games before, and also keep the ones who have played from the beginning, rather than just keep the ones who were playing from the beginning. But nonetheless, it is what it is, and I do think it is a pretty solid entry for a game that I wasn't even expecting a couple months ago. So overall, with all the good and bad things I've said about this game, I think I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. And if you're curious how I rate the other Paper Mario games, here they are below. So thank you guys for watching, and since this is a new channel, I'm open to any criticism or advice you have for the future. Thanks for watching. See ya.